Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR. And I'm your host, the counselor. And today we're going to be going into some dark territory. And this is going to be like some straight conversation for your head. And a lot of times people don't like the courageous conversations, but we're having one. And you might say, counselor, why are you having this conversation at this point? And I think maybe because first of all, we're going through this pandemic, and I think some of the behaviors that we're exhibiting might not be there if we weren't going through these changes. It's not an excuse, but I think we still need to look at it and ask ourselves. A lot of times when we're going through issues, it's important, especially for us men, to do some reflection. A lot of times we don't get reflection, maybe because half of the time we might be dealing with someone who's afraid to say something because we're so loudmouth or aggressive. Not all the time. We have some sensitive guys out there. Some ones that they're very sympathetic, and I get it. But I'm saying I'm not talking about that. We're not getting into all the personalities today. What we are doing is we're giving it to you real on why men um, beat their women, why they take that aggressive approach to them. And I think it's important that we talk about it a little bit because maybe if they see it in themselves, maybe they don't want to admit it to themselves. Maybe if these partners of theirs are ones, unfortunately, who are dealing with the batterers, can't get the message through, maybe we can do a little bit of at least awareness here. And it's not comfortable, but it is what it is. And we have to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I'm not encouraging. So I'm laying out the disclaimer right now. In no way am I encouraging violence. I'm discouraging it. Sorry. You know what I mean? And we're gonna relate. I'm gonna lay it down where you understand this is real. Me being a man, I have personal experiences as well, but I've spoken to some friends and some colleagues, and I'm listening to a couple clients that I've had, and some of these experiences are real. And these are things that when the men get together, even in groups, they're things that they would never ordinarily even expose, even when they're one to one with a counselor, right? Because they just feel that they're too vulnerable for it. But I think when they get into the arena of other men disclosing certain things, right, about themselves, it gets heavy, it gets deep. Some of them break right down. And it's group work. And I love group work, but it gets real deep. And see, this is the man thing that we don't ever really talk about. A lot of people don't know. But for some reason, it feels like a license for them to get what's off their chest, but they come hard, and it's hard to stomach some of it for a lot of people. But for some reason, it's a forum where men could talk about some of these things because you never hear some of these topics that I'm talking about may offend you. However, we're talking about awareness. So, what are some of the reasons? And you're not going to like it. So, this right now, making a disclaimer that this is something to educate and be realistic about, and also evaluate. Self evaluation is important when we look at what we're doing. Because I'm not just talking about men, but why don't we just talk about it this time? We don't need to go in all places to make it balance. Sometimes we got to get to the gritty. And that's what we're doing today. So, I'd have to say, even when I was growing up, right, I didn't live in a household where that was going down per se, but I've seen it at certain times. And it seemed like in the earlier days, it was common. I mean, you'd watch a little bit of television, even see it through the movies, the violence, the slapping, the beating, and the head twisted. It was crazy, but it was on television. And that was something that some of us grew up with this last generation. Okay. But the point is that it's serious and it was commonplace more. Not saying that's decreased or increased. However, it's still prevalent. Let's get that straight. So why do some men do it? And some of my responses, I'm just going to go through of it. Some of the men, one in particular, said, listen, um, I do it because I have the power. I'm a man. I feel I have the power. We're not talking about justification here. Any of these reasons, we're not looking behind justification. We're just listening to what's being said. Whether we take it to into consideration or not, but we have to listen and hear some of the things. It's important. Some of them say, you know what, I have power. And just being a man gives me that power. And I feel that if that power is challenged, I react. And I maintain that mindset that that power is given to me and I use it at my will. And that's just simply how some people, men, might view it. And depending upon what messages they're receiving, number one, in the home or in society, or if they were modeled this behavior, then they would adopt it more easily. I'm not saying every man, but I'm saying these are different responses for different men. Some men say they get frustrated. Like if their partner is like nagging at them, they can't tolerate it. So they start to lose it. So they start to get agitated. It could be a number of things going on, but some of them say like when they're being nagged at, they have a tendency, it slowly gets to them. And then boom, sometimes they explode. And it gets to that point where they can't tolerate the nagging, and that's their reasoning behind it. They feel their perception is that their partner is getting on their last nerve and that they're the problem. The partner, not them. So the blame is throwing on the partner, whatever's going down, right? So that's what they're believing. Oh, you're the problem. You're nagging me, right? And they also say that when they feel that their partner is pushing boundaries, just testing them, making them feel that they're being tested in the relationship, it starts to agitate and they start to react and they get aggressive for that reasoning. And sometimes they say that, the women are so smart that they feel manipulated. Like they can be manipulated. That they're saying there are men out there saying that some of the women have the power to manipulate. In the sense that they know how to get what they need to get. And then sometimes when the men think, this is all perception, right? But the point is when they feel that they have been manipulated, or if they're being crafty, or then they feel that to them it's a betrayal. Okay, so to them, once you betray them through this mental thought that they have, then it just brings out some of the worst in them. And there's also ones that have talked about spying, right? And we know, listen, we're not talking about justification and these reasons. So I know a lot of you are out there thinking to yourself, well, you know, there's a lot of reason if we're really realistic and we got the statistics, and we would know that a lot of these guys out there are running around doing what they got to do, but it's still not right. And the point is, some of them will say, well, if I were to look at the evidence, I'd probably have more evidence than not. However, the case is, this is where we have to process this whole thing, right? Where we talk about when they feel that you've been spying, right? Where are you going? What are you doing? Or they have, those times where they want to look at your phone and, hey, I need to pay a bill. Can you unlock your phone so that I could, share our account? Things like that, where you just go, you just take it for granted. And then there's days when you get tired and maybe you see that and then you're just not in the mood for it, and you just feel like, oh, I'm in the wrong mood, and you get agitated and you lose it. See? So we're not talking about the antecedents. We're just talking about, well, we are kind of talking about antecedents that leads up to the behavior, but what we are talking about is this person is having a reaction, and it's all their thought processes, right, involved. And some are using that reasoning, right? That their limits were pushed and they feel that they're being spied on. And there's ones that have that security problem, right? Where if they're with a loved one, there's those ones out there that possession. Think about the possession, right? When you've been with somebody so long, you get the impression that, you know what, we've been together so long, I start to depend on this person, and it's almost like you become one. Now, that is really about perception too, because if the other person is not doing the same thing, you've been together a long time, but maybe they're not getting closer, maybe they're getting further apart, but you still feel, due to this closeness, there's a possession there. So this possession is making you feel that you control that person. And see, when that person, right, feels that that person might go away out of their life, they might lose that love, right? And they might feel that, you know what, we've been together, this is me, and it's such a sense of loss, I can't deal with that. So they go into that mode, right? It's a sense of loss. It's almost an insecurity, but it's a sense of loss that that person might be going through, right? But if that person also is feeling threatened, like the partner is saying things that make them appear weaker, some guys have said that when they get challenged, they get out of some of them get out of control to the point where if they feel inferior or weaker, then they have a tendency to react and try to keep that in check. And how dare you attitude. It's real, right? It's real. And also, there are guys who are saying too that, believe this or not, they had some animosity towards their mothers, right? Like the mothers were a firm hand. Like imagine being in like a family household. Well, maybe it could be two parents, but the mother is got the heavy hand. It's not always the father that's up there doing the work. Like the guy's sitting back as backup a lot of cases, right? But a lot of the time it's the mother hen that's taking care of the business, right? So if she's taking care of business, trying to keep this boy in check, that boy might grow up with a little bit of attitude and he might harvest, okay, some quiet resentment. And so because this dude, right? See, this is some real psychological stuff. I want people to know that what we're talking about is wonderful. It's very practical. Okay, but what I want you to do is I want you to understand that this stuff is practical as I make it sound. You need some therapy, you need some counseling, and you need to work through it. It isn't see, this is how complex the subjects are. But what I'm saying is, going back to my point is that when you're dealing with a mother that's keeping this young man in check, if she's harsh, if she's on it, and she feels she has to do both roles because she doesn't have any time, she's not going to play with that boy. And that boy is going to grow up with some quiet resentment. Not all do. 90% get along fine. But then there's always that percentage. Just like men, there's a percentage that do every different type of thing. We all know that. But the point is that this percentage here, right, narrows down to maybe that's one of the reasons they say his mother was too controlling, too hard, and they felt like they were reenacting getting back at their mom through their partners. And that is real. It's deep. That's why I said this is where counseling and escape and self preservation come into play, right? So, or there's those guys out there that are on that balance mentality, right? Those guys that sit up there and they say, "Well, she hit me, so I hit her back." They do it because they feel, you know what? And it's funny because I think this is in the household, and you could talk to a lot of people, but of course they would say, "Oh, there are certain cultures, believe it or not, that you listen to and they say that, you know what, if a woman hits a man, you should hit her back." Right? And no, seriously. And there are people out there who live by that. And the boys grow up, you see them even on the playground, and they have this attitude like she can't hit me. And see, that has to be taught, that communication, that proper communication. Because some thinking, you hit me, I hit you. Not even understanding if it's like a communication, I like you type thing. Like there's been situations where, you know, I've had experiences dealing with that. So you got to understand. But on the adult level, right? This is the thing too. Think about that. That's a whole different playground. This is under the one roof where you're dealing with someone who might have a heavy hand. So some men say, well, you know what? You pushed me. So you pushed me and then you kept hitting and whatever the situation may be. And the justification is we can't talk about that. All they're saying is that you hit me, so I hit you back. So never mind first. If she hits me, I responded. Or even the first. If she hits me first, I respond. That's what some say. Or if they're in public, right? And it's not even about the flirt. The flirt is another subject. But if they're in public and the men have said, if somehow their woman embarrasses them in public, they have a tendency to internalize some of these behaviors and take it in and take out this frustration on their partner, maybe when they get home or um, on the way home. I tell you right now, I know of a story where there was a couple that were on their way home and they had two children, okay, and they were on their way home, and the parents, the husband and the wife, were arguing prior to getting into the car. And then what happened was the argument ensued during the drive, and it got so out of hand that the woman pulled the wheel and he responded, and headlocks, the whole, it just got out of control. The kids were witness to this traumatic event. And the point was they ended up slamming into the uh, side bank and just had it out. And then the funny thing is that they didn't really, they got themselves together. They went back home and they had it out. And the thing is that the woman had said that this was a real problem, clearly, and she went through it. And oddly enough, he backed off when they got home, and their world just changed after that. And as it should, but their world just changed after that. And the woman had said, like, you know what, that was it. And I'll tell you right now, when it comes to these reasons that are presented in regards to this violence, they say, according to the statistics, one of the big components to dealing or working with or trying to prevent it or escaping or just trying to manage anything is when the women actually take a stand, right? So we got to say that. We got to say when they actually take a stand. And I know it's not easy. I'm not saying that, but some of them, when they have to take a stand, it's honestly, it could scare the hell out of you. However, it's just the cases because there are real things happening out there. Some say that it's better when some have just put up their head and said no, no more, enough. Because even remember, when you have to go through partners treatment with your partner, sorry, and you're dealing, that doesn't mean because you're going into the treatment that it stops all of a sudden the violence. That person could be working through it. It could take months, it could take years, who knows. But the point is, the law, it could go on despite treatment. We're not trying to give the impression that treatment's going to definitely help. However, whether they're brought there through court or whether they feel that through it's a treatment option being brought to the, to deal with this thing, or by way of what, someone saying I'm not going to be with you anymore, right? If you don't do this counseling, whatever the threat is. And there are some that show up for counseling based on their understanding that, yeah, I messed up, there's something going on and I need some support to help with that. But there are many different reasons why it's brought to the table. But the point is that one of the major factors is women who stand up at least and put some serious resistance out there and say, no, I've had enough, whatever. Figured that out. Just it's more effective. But finding support as well, right? In addition to that. But they say it could be a scary situation. We've talked about this, people, but these are some of the reasonings behind it. But I would say, you know, um, jealousy is a big one too. Men who are jealous. Some of them lose control right there in the moment. They don't even wait till they get home. They don't even wait to get in the car. If they get the signal, they just trip on it. And that's where they get aggressive. And they might even get aggressive with not just their partner, but the person the partner's referring to, right? Or follow that up completely. It could be dangerous, right? Seriously. There's also guys who've said that they've had some problems in a relationship when it comes to battling custody for a child. See, because then what happens is the playing field gets a little bit more level. They don't feel it is in the end. But when you're used to considering yourself at this level, right, separate from your partner, now all of a sudden you get brought down to a level where you got to deal with them and actually be considered by a third party. That has triggered a lot of them. Whether it's good or bad, it's still triggered a lot of them. And I can understand why that would trigger. You're losing your kids, right? Whatever reason you're feeling threatened by it. And the serious people do some crazy things out there. But for the most part, that's where some of them feel threatened. If they're feeling that there's a custody battle and it's getting really tense, then they start to lose it. So that's their reasoning behind it, right? And they say when they lose it too when they're in arguments with their partner and they feel that they're not having the upper hand anymore or they're losing ground, right? That doesn't make sense to them, so they use that as reasoning behind their violence, right? Or some actually said that their gender inequality is starting to get a little bit much when it's being used on them. So there are men out there that are saying their partners are actually making them, oh, because I'm a woman or this and that, and men are this. So they feel like it's almost, they're feeling victimized from some perspective. They're feeling like that's kind of agitating them, and it's almost like under the skin. Because you know how sometimes you hear, and we all hear it, when we have partners and women go out sometimes and they make them jokes, oh, Barry's so dumb, or thing's an idiot, and they're just joking and everybody's giggling and laughing. Well, maybe Tommy Boy's not giggling and laughing. Maybe Tommy's having a temper, right? Two Tommy is losing his stuff behind your back. And those are the ones you gotta be careful with. We haven't seen a movie on that, but I'm sure we'll see one on it soon. Little Tommy losing his mind because he's being teased. We've seen it. We've seen it in some very destructive, sad. It's not funny. I apologize. I'm just saying that some of them, they can really get under your skin, but some of them are a little unnerving. But it's funny how you see some build up that frustration, and 90% don't do anything, but it's that 10% of the agitated ones that do go out, and that's scary. But the point is that they're feeling what, right? They're feeling ways and they can't take it. So if they feel that their gender's being threatened, I don't know. It's just a flip. Somewhere it flips. And see, I've always wondered. That's something that makes you really wonder when you see all that going down, right? But it's not really a mystery. It's more interesting. But also, I had one gentleman tell me that he felt that men in general in society were in a position that, you know, they had this position in society where it was expected that they be on top of their game that way. Well, that doesn't apply to everyone. I don't think every man's walking around. There, most men appreciate the women. There are guys, but these are reasons why a lot of them are very valid reasons, because we have to be realistic with society with some of the expectations out there. True. I mean, we still do blue boy and pink girl, right? So we have our roles and expectations. But this is something in society where there are impressions, right? Right? There are impressions out there and signs, and you can see it even in certain religions where this is preached. Many different religions. I'm not questioning that. I'm not here to challenge your question. I'm here to talk about what is being said. You know what I mean? What's being said in your head is what I'm telling you, and you don't have to like it. But I do. I know you do, because you understand. We have to look at things every once in a while. So this is something that we're looking at. The other thing is alcohol. Alcohol is the reason that men used to say it's almost like it's a reactionary thing where it's just used. It's something that they're saying it's one of the elements that make up the aggression, right? Alcohol use and substance abuse for sure. Right or wrong, that's something that does agitate and bring out whatever in men and women too, but we're talking about men. And there were those ones who had been sexually abused, and when they were disclosing, then it came to be understood, and you could imagine how sensitive the issue was, is that it came to be understood that it wasn't something that they could talk about. It's not something that, like, could you imagine that being in, I know a lot of you can, but could you imagine being in that bubble where that's happening to you or happened to you, and you don't feel like you could talk to anyone about it? Because number one, there's a lot of reasons why people won't talk about it. And some of them, and some of them are, well, we're a very judgmental society, number one. Number two, that's one way to get it out. Alcohol, right? If it slips. So I've had people do it. It's scary, but I've had people drinking, and that came out, and we're like, what? Because that is the one of the gateways that they use. But they've been sexually abused, and they're disclosing. And wow, that's a conversation, and it's a very, very important to be supportive, because some men get in that bubble where they, and remember, we're not talking about the justification, we're talking about what's going down. And if they're feeling that their communication, they can't get it out, it's deep. And this is why I say, if you even get it started in your relationship, you got to go and get some support, some help, and really look into it, because it's deeper than just the surface. So there could be a lot going on that you might never. The truth be told, you might not be able to help that person, right? We can't fix people. We think we can, but we can't. And sometimes you got to survive. You know what I mean? And you got to try to thrive. But the thing is, sometimes you got to look into it. It's deep. And I'm not saying don't support people, but we don't know. And so when you hear this, I don't want you to go home and point fingers, and next thing you know, there's an ambulance at your door, and then it's my fault. No, not at all. I want you to use your beaner that you've been given. You understand? Use your beaner. So what I'm saying is, think before you act. Please keep your mouth shut. Let it go. Let this podcast think. I can't even talk about it. Let this podcast sink into your head, okay, for a little bit. All right, because that's when you're gonna know you're safe after a couple of days. Because you know that person's probably wondering where you are right now. But the point is, I'm trying to make it is that this is something that is deep, and that person could be acting out. You won't even know it. It's not good enough for you. It has nothing to do with you. Like it's like I'm not saying we're not getting into the blame, but I'm just saying that this is one of the reasons why some are hurting and they don't know how to communicate it and they feel they've been hurt. So, like that, a lot of times when people are doing things in this life, certain things have happened and we don't really communicate those things because of our insecurities or our our understanding that a lot of people just don't care. That's what we're afraid of. And then honestly, the truth is some don't. Some do, but some don't. And that's what we're afraid of. You can't be afraid of that. You got to just go for it and say, hey, listen, this is, I got to deal with this. You know what I mean? I got to do something, right? I matter. So, or there's men out there who do it because their father left them. They have this resentment in them, this anger, and these are reasons that I'm hearing, right? And then they either reflect and blame or whatever. Something inside is not being communicated, so they're communicating it wrong, whatever the frustration is. And I don't know. Like, I think that it's just, it is what it is. And it's not your job to really figure it out for that person. So that's why I said don't try to fix people. Try to work with them if you can. But understand when you start that road, right, that that person might not be happy. And if you don't go and try and get the right counselor for you that's listening to both of you or him, then you know what? It's just going to be an exercise in futility. Nothing's really going to come out of it. They'll just be going through the motions, and it'll look good. However, there's some serious work to be done if that is the case, right? Right? If they think that the partner has cheated, definitely, right? But there's a script that a lot of men run in their head. It's like a role that their partner has to play. Okay, and there are certain expectations in regard to this role that a man may have, and if this role changes or switches, then that becomes a switch for them and it's trigger, right? So if I expect that you're playing this role and then and what am I talking about, counselor? What are you talking about? Well, let's just talk about it simply put. All right, simply put, I'm telling you that, let's say, for example, if you're used to being out of the house, both of you are at the house, and you're both working, and all of a sudden, you get laid off. Okay, so now you're the man that got to sit at home, and when you got some kids at home or whatever, and you got to take on some of the responsibilities as a woman. Now, that could be judgmental when I say responsibility as a woman, but it's everyone's responsibility. But we all play roles, and it's the roles in our head that we're talking about, however you want to judge it. But the point being is that there are expectations in our mind. And when these expectations change and we can't cope with that change, boom, it's like a vein in the forehead, pop. So it's not good. But the point is that if that man doesn't, if he goes, well, I'm supposed to be this type of person, and now I'm up here doing this cooking, or I got to do this, or I got to take on these. It might not compute in their mind, and that might be a trigger. So there are people who say I've had expectations, and you know what? Once I couldn't handle it, right? Because there are people out there, men, that we see in the news that can't handle it, right? You know that. Like when I see things in the news, it's really scary. First of all, because it's getting nuts. Let's go even back to the last 10 years. There's certain things that have happened that I just can't believe have happened. And I don't want to start condemning people, but I'm saying, like, even with the Las Vegas shooting, there were like 500 injuries. And I was like, out of my mind. I'm like, what the hell happened to this man? Like, this man's out of his damn mind. Like, what happened? What is going on? Now, we can't explain it. All I'm saying is that there are acts out there happening, right? Where a lot of them are, not a lot of them, but I'm just saying there's a percentage of men who, right, they take it to that level, man, and you just can't believe it. I mean, see, even when I was growing up, I remember hearing some of the men working in the all male environments and, right, certain things that were said. But the point is that it was always generally respectful, for sure. It wasn't but there were times when I got in the other environment where it was men and women, and you could hear some voice in their disapproval. Some of them felt it was a threat, right? That very power imbalance. They didn't grow up thinking that. They always thought, hey, what is this person doing my boss? So the change, some weren't accepting it. And then I thought to myself, well, they're older, so some of that influence doesn't matter. They're on their way out to pasture or whatever. But this is a challenge for some. And that's why I say some of these men, and they have a hard time with it. And it's just accepting that, there may be a woman up there that may be their butt. Now, there's a lot of men that depending in the system for sure, that it's not really an issue, but there are some they still struggle with. And I would think that even in 2020, it wouldn't be much as an issue. But we still have our reindeer games, and we need to understand, right, that there are ones that, unlike the ones in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, who at the early 90s who would voice it out loud, there's ones now that don't say nothing unless it's in private, of course. But they're holding it under their breath, right? And for the most part, those are really a handful. But to tell you, they do exist. I do remember hearing one comment from a man, and it really surprised me, his comment, because I didn't really at first know how to wrap my head around it. I was like, because you know what, when people say certain things, you try to listen carefully, and then whatever they say, at first it seems so out there that you want to dismiss it, right? Until you realize that, as ridiculous as that thing could sound, this person's actually serious. They actually mean it. So when I was hit with this question, I started to reevaluate what was really behind this statement. And he said to me, he said, I went aggressive because I thought it was good for her. And I was like, what? What do you mean good for her? I said, how could that be good for her? He's like, no, I really thought it. He goes, because there were times where she was trying to do things, and I thought that when I did it, I got aggressive, she would learn. Because my expectation and my mindset was that I thought if I did this, she would learn, she would pick it up. And I went, really? And he goes, yeah, like I thought it would make her a better person. And I went, wow, like this person, like this is what, and hey, you know what? The thing is, we, in today, 2020, we cannot dismiss these ideas and these responses that people give us. We just can't. You can't ignore them. If anything, we got to learn from it. We got to try better to understand and actually acknowledge it. We have to acknowledge that the person's got this on their mind. And if we really get concerned about it, we got to do something about it, right? Like, you know, because that right there could be people right now listening to this podcast going, that's an alarm bell. And I'm taking this casual because I've seen some things, and it takes a little bit to get me there. But I've seen some things. I might have seen some more than most people, trust me. I've seen some, I've been in different environments. Man, I've been in some different environments. But what I'm saying, I might take it lightly. But for the average listener, they might be on alarm right now because they might like, man, don't you know? Don't you know what that person's saying? That should be an emergency call. You should leave right away and get this person reported, right? And it would make you think you do have a responsibility, but then when you think about it, you go, okay, well, let's see where this thing's going. And let's try to understand it, and then you make the rational decision when you're working with the person. And if they're there to get some support, that's different. See, it would be different than just hearing that at like a town hall meeting. But if they're in my environment, it's therapeutic. But my point is, you're getting a response, and that's a deep response for a lot of people. But I get to absorb it because my experience is in, and I pride myself on being committed to education, continuous learning. So what I'm saying is, and that's not just learning from the books, that's learning from the people and experiences and reevaluating and documenting and reflecting and discussing. And that's what it is and all it is. So, what I'm saying is, this person had this rationale in their mind, and I thought to myself, they actually, that's their perception. And we have to work with that. And that's as simple as we got to work with that. But if I thought it was a threat, I would, and this is what I'm saying. When you talk to people, there are ethical guidelines that you have to. So if you're concerned, there are ethical guidelines that you have to adhere to. So if he has a partner, those guidelines would say if you feel, in your opinion, that person is going to do something to harm that person, because then you got to report it. But I think what he was saying is he actually thought that he had some sort of control and he was making that person, keeping that person. So we have to work through that. And this is where we're at. So that's why I said some people have the belief. But if you get the impression that you're dealing with someone that you feel that they're going to go home and hurt some, you know what I mean? Or if they're doing it, not just if they're going to go home and do it, if they have this going on, you still have some obligation to get this checked into, right? For sure. And there are those ones that come straight to the chase. And they said, I shut them down. Sometimes, if I, when I get aggressive and I lose it, I go straight for the gusto. I try to shut them down. And I shut them down because I know I can shut them down. And I do it because I don't want to deal with it. And I don't feel I have to. So I use that. So I just do the shutdown, because that's all I can take. I can't take no more, or whatever the reason be it. So they go right for the quick shot, the shutdown, which is these behaviors. Like I said, they exist. We're not judging, and we have to look at things without judging, and we have to understand they are what they are. So if you're dealing with that situation, then you need to know that the majority of people who are dealing with it fared better when they took a stand. And even letting the person that you know taking a stand, right? Like it could be hard. Nothing's easy. And I've said it and I'll say it again. A lot of people who expect things to be easy, that's when life gets harder. And then when you expect life to be some challenges, I believe you try to work through it, and you appreciate those good times, because it gets easier through. Sometimes it don't, and unique. It's hard to cover everything, but sometimes it does it for certain people. And I gotta say that only because I'm thinking in context of the pandemic going on. But my point is that standing up does help certain people. It maybe there's people out there it hasn't helped, but for the majority, I would think that if you let that person know that, look, I can't deal with this. This isn't gonna work for me, or I'm done. Whatever, let them know that this, it's scary, because I will tell you right now how scary it is. And I will tell you because a lot of people wouldn't really tell you this. And these are experiences. See, family member, I know, and this is where it could be really worrisome, is that a family member that I know, I ain't going to say which side of the family, but I will say that a family member I know had an individual who was doing it. Because, like I said, when I was growing up, it was common. I've seen it. Like, it wasn't directly in my, but I've seen it. And for a young person, and believe it or not, there's a lot of young people who have this PTSD. They say they've seen, but come on, they've been traumatized from it. But the point is, I've seen certain things go down. And, anyways, on that note, there's a family member that had this person continuously doing it, and people knew about it. Their business, whatever. It's not that it was accepted; it just wasn't acted upon, and people knew about it, which could be in a number of communities, especially around that time. And this person actually, and I don't want to scare people, but really you shouldn't be scared, because you got to know what's true. The truth is that that person could not let go. And once that person got out of the relationship, they did pursue them. And that could be one of the scariest things. And I know I deal with young people who have boyfriends who really have had some real challenges controlling themselves, and their lives have been upside down, but they put these young women's lives upside down because they're dealing with their own stuff, and it gets so heavy. And my point is, they end up doing this, the crazy pursuing, and it just gets out of control. And I have to say, when we're talking about this, and we're talking about these, I don't want to skip a beat, and I do want to say that these are real situations that are existing today, and people, young people who are dealing with it, it is scary as hell. But you got to follow through. You cannot, if you're dealing with that, you cannot just sit back. And I know a lot of us have problems with the system sometimes, right? But this is an avenue that, no, you push it out there. You have those higher expectations and you work through it, and it's not going to be easy. But my point being is, when it was in the family, it really escalated and it led to fatality. And I don't know. I think even when you're in a family and you hear of your family members going through that, you go, "Oh my goodness, there's something I got to do." But then you might also be thinking, "Oh, you got somebody who has some real mental health challenges on there." But no, believe it or not, that is almost like a developmental stage a lot of men go through. Women, men too. Some of them go through the "I'm gonna do myself" stage, right? To get that partner in their lives, and that partner is like, "What? I didn't love you, but now I love you again." No, it doesn't work that way. But you got my sympathy, and now you drew me. Oh my God, the strategies and the dynamics of relationships are just unbelievable. But I would say there's a number of men in this 7.5 billion population that have used that little tactic, right? When we felt that we couldn't lose, you know what I mean? Because this is the truth. They say that men could run around, but when women run around, that's crazy, and they lose it. And a man, so this is the stereotype. I'm hitting you with the stereotype, and you got to hear it. The stereotype is, you can mess around, but I can't. And that's the stereotype that's out there, and that's sometimes mentally what a lot of them men generally think. But the truth is, it's a really challenging dynamic, and it really leads back to some of these behaviors. And I think that we have to look at these as, we need to improve in a lot of the policies and procedures that are out there, but we have to look at them as real, and there are real threats, and there are young people out there that might be feeling under threat even after they go through the courts, right? Because, and this is the thing too, just because you might have an order against somebody, that doesn't mean they ain't getting out. Because a lot of times they be in maybe for a minute, then they get out, and then the person's worried of how frustrated that person's going to be and if they're going to react. That's a scary situation, and that could be something that's totally unfair. And if you don't have anybody in your life that stands up, because a lot of them might have a mother and they're feeling scared, and they got this boyfriend, usually a little bit older. That's a scary one too, those little predators. And I don't even want to say predators, I'm just saying they're not really predators if they're a couple years, but there's predators out there, but not in this instance. I shouldn't say that. I just say there's ones that, and I gotta say, there are some older men that try to court these younger girls, and even to me, 4 or 5 years is still, that's court. That's inappropriate. You know what I mean? If you're over at 20 and you're up there looking at a 16-year-old, no, 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 no. I don't care what the court say. I don't care what the law says. Because if you go against the law, that's one thing. But certain laws, you gotta, like, as parents, we get disarmed because of the law. Because some of those laws talk about the 14 and permission and all that stuff. It's like, no, if you're a parent, I'm telling you right now, if you got a bad feeling about some dude that's older, tell him about it. Tell him, sorry, you can't come around here. I don't care how much he loves you. You ain't staying for dinner. Tell your kids that. I don't care. You're not going to be liked by them. It's not going to be easy. But I'm going to tell you right now, do it. Especially if you live in a big city, because they are lurkers out there. Some of them guys with that low self-esteem, right? Any other woman their age is going to say, yeah, right. But an influence, if they can get a little bit of influence, oh yeah, they'll use it. And see, the fathers get to look at that too and go, what's wrong with this dude, right? And no matter, see, and this is the dynamic that you got to deal with. Because if you're a father and your daughter's into this dude, And you know, maybe he's a little older, but you're still not comfortable with it. You are contending with your daughter, right? Your daughter's putting up a fuss. Not saying, oh, I like him or not, but putting up a fuss, agitated. They don't, remember, they know it all, and you're against them in their eyes because they want what they want. And that's just parenting. And you got to understand that. That's why I say when you get opportunities, tell your friends, if they got some older dudes flying, I don't care how much money they got, the Lambos, and I don't care if they're in the top videos in the TO or the New York. I don't care how much money they got. You better tell them to go do something with it, deal with somebody their own age, because a lot of these young girls are getting influenced by that money, that game. And the thing about it is, nah. It's up to you. You got yours, and just because the law says, "Oh," you say, I know I'm not gonna be liked, and I know it's not gonna be easy, but I really say the more work you put in, the more work you get out. There are no guarantees. That's life, but put the work in. Right, really do. I'm considered. You know what? I don't even want to get into it, but I do want to say that it's a work, especially you live in a big city. So, as far as I'm concerned, we've covered a lot of information. We went dirty today. We went down dirty because we had to. And pointing the finger, you can't point the finger on reality. This is reality, so there is no pointing the finger, right? Basically, this is where you look inside yourself. There's no one to point at. So you gotta look inside yourself. If you're engaging in these behaviors, I can't judge you. You're gonna be judged in your own way. But I tell the partners, don't wait for the judgment, right? Plan. And so you say to yourself, counselor, what are you saying? The counselor is saying, my example earlier is that I know not everybody has the way out, but I really suggest you take a stand and find a way out if you need to. But you got to plan your way through some of these situations, right? Not just planning activities. If you're not happy and something's going down, and you feel you can't, just because a lot of us know that he ain't gonna accept that. He don't want to lose me. I'm everything, right? Because as sad as this is, the person that put some attention and even abuse in you, that's still in their mind called invested in you. And the more they consider their brain processing this as investment, they don't want to lose you. You're valuable to them. And as I said in the beginning of this podcast, you've been together so long you become as one. And when that person cannot lose you, you need to know they're going to do everything that they can to keep you. And you got to understand. So that's why if you are in a very delicate situation, you know, you're gonna have to plan and find your way. And I do caution you because everybody always says, "Oh, you know what? Go to a family member and let them know." Well, of course you could go to a trusted family member because that's what we do. But be careful and be mindful because you have to make sure that that family member is someone you could trust, someone that really is not gonna. Because some think they're doing you a favor, and you get you reach out there, and then it happens and that person doesn't mean harm, but they end up saying, well, we could try to fix it, right? Because a lot of people will see your situation and they may feel that they want to fix it, and rather than fix it, it might get not only just worse, it just, I'm concerned that it might shut down someone, whereas they won't try for themselves again. So if you do feel, try to discuss it with, if you can, with people that are you trust that might not be directly related to the family. And if you do have somebody in the family, then just keep this in mind. And what we're doing here is, what are we talking about? We're talking about people and how people are functioning in this society, and how we need to think about certain things that go on. And sometimes there's no rationale behind things that are happening. They're just happening. And if you could hear something or you could discuss it or evaluate and try to do something about it, that's what it's all about. That's what the podcasts are about. Working with people to make them better, not judge them. And we can't make them better if we don't find the truth. And I mean better being, there's always room for improvement, but if your situation is bad, it could get better. But a lot of people don't know that, especially now they feel they don't. And if they hear something and do something, Sometimes it just takes that. And sometimes we don't understand our intent. Our intent is we're listening for things because deep down inside, there's an interest out there. Something's going on. And sometimes it's just, might not be for you, but it's for somebody else. But I really believe that there are indicators that if we put ourselves out there, we will find it if we have that intent, right? And sometimes we are not aware of the intent. It just happens. It's just we're open to it. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's a human thing that you probably ain't going to hear in the textbooks. It's called instinct, intent, and instinct. And I said it. The counselor said a million times. A lot of people, they need that, what? That paper book reasoning. Those theorizes that they have out there is one thing. But that instinct, my goodness. You'd be surprised how when some of you reflect back on some of the instincts that you've had, you've just your whole day has your whole week has changed because you follow through with your instinct. You know what I mean? And you're damned if you do, but you're damned if you don't. But one big thing is that if you go with your instinct, you're not gonna like it because we have this fear. A lot of us are operating on fear. So if you got that instinct, I'm telling you to bring it back. So I want to say thank you to my listeners. We've covered some deep material today. So be like the wise old bird and spread the word. Take care of yourselves.